Okay, hi everyone. This is Tara Kay. I'm the Campus and Faculty Development Specialist at IDEA. Today we're going to look at your reports, and I'm going to begin with our recommendations on reflective practice. I'm going to go over all the major components of the report, including the adjusted scores and the converted averages. We're going to also look at what genuine meaning you can get from your IDEA feedback, and end with the importance of a longitudinal view. So what do we mean by reflective feedback practice? This is what we mean by reflective practice. At first, you collect the feedback from the students who can provide their survey responses either at home, in class, or in the lab. And if you attended the previous training session, what we recommend in terms of improving response rates is if you're teaching a face-to-face classroom, be sure to devote in-class time for the students to complete the survey either on their mobile phone, on their laptop, or have the IT department bring in loan a laptop. Then you look at the results and you interpret them and put them into context and make any kind of comparisons that you'd like. And I'm going to talk about this in a little bit in terms of what the system allows you to do in terms of providing comparison. Then you can read and learn from the resources that are keyed to your reports, and I'll show you how you can access those resources. And if you're interested, you can reflect and discuss with your colleagues in groups or look up on the information that we've provided you with the IDEA community in terms of blogs and articles. Then if you're interested in looking at the results and the recommendations, you can try new ideas, and I'll show you how you can use the results to experiment in terms of teaching methods, and then try again the next term and feed into the reflective practice loop that we recommend in terms of making the long-term, longitudinal reflective practice and also improvement if needed. So now your reports should be ready and they should be generated to you already. What you will receive is an email from your institution saying that your reports are ready for viewing. And it'll give you the link of where you can access those reports. It's the same link that you received when you were completing the objectives, if you had a chance to complete the objective selection form. Also, you'll notice in the email there are two PDFs. One is called the qualitative report PDF, and one is called the quantitative report. These are basically a summary of all the data that is collected from your survey. However, these reports don't contain all the information. We highly recommend that you actually log into the system, and I'll show you what the system looks like, and look at your reports and do the interpretations there. So the way you log in is you will receive a link from your campus that says this is where to go to view your reports. You would use your current credentials that you're currently using on campus, so you don't have to create a brand new login and password. It's the exact same credentials that you're currently using to access anything else that you're accessing on campus. And that will verify your credentials and take you to the page where you need to go. So I'm going to change screens and show you the live site of what you will see when you first go in. So the first thing you'll see will be a list of all your courses, and I'm just going to slowly scroll down. And this is the sandbox that I'm using, is teaching a couple of courses for this particular term. At any point, if you have reports from the previous terms, you'll be able to see them on the left side by choosing the previous terms down from the drop-down menu. And you have a quick glance of your courses that you're teaching. I'm going to use this anthropology course as an example, but just to stay on this page for a few minutes, you'll be able to see when the survey was completed, what the response rate for that survey, and how many students were enrolled in your class. Now, because it's ready, you'll be able to see a button that says View Results. I'm going to click on that button. And this is what you'll see. I'm going to make my screen a little smaller so you can see everything on the screen. So the first thing you'll see on the top right side is how many students are enrolled in the class, how many responded, and what the response rate is. And you'll see 5 tabs: summative, formative, quantitative, qualitative, and segment comparison. And on the main page also, if you click on this arrow here, it'll expand and show you the questions that are asked the students about their motivation and habits. And I'm going to talk about how this contributes to the calculation of the adjusted score. You'll also be able to toggle between adjusted averages and raw averages. I'll talk about these in a minute. And you'll also be able to make comparisons to the IDEA database, all the courses that are currently in the IDEA database, more than 45,000 courses, and also the IDEA discipline. And at your campus, you would also see another line item in the drop-down menu that will say your institution. So you will have 3 comparisons if the data is available. So let's begin with the box on the left side. It says summary, your average. This number is just basically an average of these 2 numbers. That's all that this number means. So these 2 boxes, what do these mean? This box is a summary average of the responses of the students that they completed. And it asks the students just 2 questions. One is about the teacher and one is about the course. And this is the only time, and I'm going to click on this box, this is the only time out of all the questions that your students are asked, depending on the instrument. Sometimes the students get 40 questions, sometimes they get 18 questions, depending on the instruments that you're using. This is the only question that is asked about the instructor. All other questions are about the learning objectives or the teaching methods that they observed in the classroom. So here, if you click on that summary evaluation of teaching effectiveness, this box is an average of the response to rating the instructor as an excellent teacher and excellent course. And this number is just an average of these 2 numbers. So if I go back, again, this number is an average of the 2 numbers from the excellent teacher, excellent course data. The progress on relevant objectives is an average of the responses to the progress that the students have made on those targeted objectives. So I stands for essential objective, important objective, and E stands for essential objective. And you can see a list of the specific details of each of those objectives that were selected as either important or essential here on this page. And on the left, you'll see the average, the converted average. I'll explain what that is when I go back, and the distribution of the scores. At any point, you can change the view between raw and adjusted averages and the comparison to database, discipline, or institution. So I'm going to go back and explain adjusted and converted, and then I'm going to stop and see if you have any questions. So one of the unique things about the IDEA instrument is that we control for factors that are beyond the influence of the instructor. And the purpose of adjusting scores is to level the playing field when comparisons need to be made between instructors who are teaching different kinds of classes. So for example, scores of instructors who are teaching large required general education classes, when we get the adjusted averages, these can be compared much more authentically to those teachers who are teaching small, high-level in-major courses. And if I scroll down here, you see these questions that are asked of the students about their motivation and behavior and course habits. The instrument adjusts the score based on student background, preparation, work habits, motivation, and class size. So what you see here, when you toggle between raw averages and you change it to adjusted averages, this number here represents the adjusted score based on these questions here. So that's what adjusted scores mean. This is the way, one way of leveling the playing field if you are interested in making comparisons. Another one we recommend to look at is always look at the converted average comparison here, and I'm going to mouse over here for a minute. Now, the converted average comparison compares the course relative to the overall mean in the comparison group by telling you if your score for this particular class is similar, lower, or higher, or much higher, or much lower. So if any kind of comparison needs to be made with groups other than of courses in your discipline, we recommend that you always look at the converted average. So over time, such comparisons can provide you with useful information if you're interested in making those kind of comparisons. Basically, the converted average is just a t-score or a standardized scores that allows for a much more valid comparison. So I'm going to stop here and see if you have any questions on anything I've said about how to access your reports and what you see on this page in terms of summative, progress on relevant objectives, adjusted averages, and idea database. I'm going to unmute you for a few minutes. Hopefully there's not too much background noise. So you are all unmuted. Okay. Again, if you have any questions and I've muted you, just feel free to post your questions on the chat. I see a question coming up on the chat. If you're seeing that idea reports are still being processed in the summative section, what does that mean? I can't see what you're seeing, but if it's just one section in the summative, so for example, let me see if I can give you an example. Down here, where I'm moving my mouse, if that's the only area where it says the reports are still being processed, what that means is that the norms are still being calculated. And the way that the norms are calculated is that the system waits for at least 100 courses that has a similar discipline code. And if there are not enough courses to generate a norm, then that section will not generate a report until we have enough courses from your discipline in the database to generate a norm number. Does that make sense, Kurt? He says yes. So you should be able to see some numbers there, but there are some areas where norms have to be, that there is a threshold of at least 100 courses that is needed for a norm generation. And if it doesn't meet that threshold, you will not see that number. Hopefully by next term, there will be enough courses, and we're hoping that by then 100% of all the courses and all the disciplines will see all the numbers that they need to see. Okay. So if there's no more questions on this page, I'm going to go to the next tab, which really I feel it's the most important tab, which is not included in your email PDFs. That's why I really recommend that if you're interested in looking at data and participating in that reflective practice, the next tab is where you would go. This is the formative tab. So what the formative tab does, it takes all the high-level information that you saw on the summative tab and makes it meaningful for faculty. What you see here is a list of teaching methods and styles. And I'm going to take an example of a specific teaching method to see if it gives a suggested action. You'll see here it gives suggested actions for each teaching method. So let's say I'm going to take the first month, the first teaching method, demonstrated the importance and significance of the subject matter. Now remember, all of these teaching methods, if you're using the diagnostic instrument or the teaching essentials instrument, are asked of the student on how frequently did you observe this teaching method be used in the classroom. So if I click on here, you'll notice a couple of things. It expands and it shows the average for that particular teaching method and the distribution. It gives the two relevant, I mean, in this case, it's just one objective that correlates to this teaching method that was chosen as either important or essential. And it makes a suggested action. It tells you you employed the method less frequently than those teaching classes of similar size and level of student motivation. And it connects these recommendations to professional development resources, which is really at the heart of our mission as a nonprofit. If you click on this link, it'll take you to the resource related to that specific teaching method. We collaborate with teaching and learning experts in the field, the Professional Organizational Development Network, or the POD network, which makes it available for you regardless of whether you are in the system website or not. So if you're in the system, you will have that link that's connected to that teaching method, but you can also go on the IDEA website and you can access all of these teaching and learning resources. Now, if you go down here, it'll give you some tips on how to use this teaching method in the classroom. But it also tells you how to apply the teaching method online and how to assess the teaching method. You'll also be able to see the authors of this publication and the university, and you'll also have access to the resources and references. So this is the formative tab that is not part of the PDFs that you get in your emails. This is really, I think, the heart of this system, which is unique about the IDEA student ratings of instruction. Now, if you love looking at numbers and you're interested in the distribution of a particular item, for example, an item that you may not have selected as important or essential, they nevertheless all show up here, because the reason for that is all this data is collected to contribute to the validity of the instrument. So here you will have access to each of the distribution of the scores of the students, the mean score for that item, the standard deviation, and how many students responded. And if you created custom questions, the results would show up here at the very bottom. And it would calculate the mean score, the standard deviation, and the total responses for your custom questions. The qualitative tab is just very simple, exactly what that means. It's an area where students type in their responses, and because they type in their responses in the system, there is no editing. So there's nobody from your campus that's going to go in there and edit the responses just in case. So just that you know, this is exactly what the students type up. That the ability for somebody outside to edit is just not built into the system. And each bullet item here represents a student response. And again, these comments are the ones that were added as a custom comment. The custom questions ability is you can either create a multiple choice question for your custom questions or a comment text box. The last tab is called the segment comparison tab, that looks at all the items that the questions that the students have responded to, and it gives the average here in blue. And if you're interested in looking at how it compares to the organizational unit, so in this sandbox, it's reflecting the organization unit of the sandbox. When you use this on your end and you click on the drop-down menu, you will see something totally different. Exactly what your organizational unit is set up, that will appear here in the Dropbox. So I'm just going to click on College of Arts and Sciences. And what it does is it generates a segment comparison in purple. So that's the results of the faculty, and the purple is the segment comparison for all the items. For that particular unit, however way your unit has been organized. So I'm going to stop here and unmute everyone. Hopefully there's no background noise, and feel free to ask any questions or type your question in the chat section.
Online meeting.
I'll just give you a few more minutes. I just muted everyone, and see if there are any questions in the chat area. Okay, I'm going to change my screen back to the PowerPoint and talk about the meaning that you can get from your reports. So what meaning can you get from the idea feedback reports? I like to use this image of a speedometer, and if I were to show you this speed and ask you, is this speed too fast or too slow? You would say, well, it depends. It really depends on the person who's driving, whether they're driving on the freeway or are they driving in a school zone. This is also how we recommend that you look at your report. Your report is to be viewed in context. What kind of course was it? Were you given the course last minute because another instructor wasn't able to teach it? Was it a brand new course? Is it a course that you've been teaching for many years? So the meaning that you can take away from the report is to make sure that you interpret the results in context. And now that you have the ability in the system, compare them to the previous term, then reflect and discuss. Also, don't forget that this instrument is going to allow you to try new ideas. For example, if you want to try a new idea using a new teaching method and see how the students respond, this is a really good time to do it. Which brings me to the importance of a longitudinal view. If you're teaching the same class every term, you can keep track of the data and use reflective practice and tweak your courses if you think it's necessary, and see if the data changes over time. Even if you're not teaching the same course, it's also interesting to see how the teaching methods data may change over time depending on the sections that you're teaching. And the implication of this kind of longitudinal reflective practice and closing the loop is that it's just good practice. And it's also not a coincidence that it also happens to be what every accrediting body is looking for, because research has shown that whenever faculty practice or use the reflective practice methodology, it has shown to improve teaching and learning. So again, look at your reports not just a one time, look at it in terms of context, and make sure you look at it longitudinally. And just because if you think you have a low score in quotation mark, that it's giving you some kind of meaning. It is not. You should be looking at it in context and longitudinally. Okay, I'm going to stop here and see if you have any questions about anything else, anything at all during this past 35 minutes, and wait for you to type any questions in the text box, because I think the background noise is just too much. Okay, I don't see any questions. Well, I hope this training session was useful to you. I will send Brian, oh, I see a question. Let me put everybody on mute and respond to the question. A question from Tamara. Why is the number 42 in the second box from the left while the other two numbers are in the first box. Let me go back. I can't see what you're seeing, but I can maybe use my screen. Okay, so your question, Tamara, is why is the 42 in number in the second box from the left while the other two are in the first box? Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying, why is this showing in the lower distribution box and this one is showing in the much lower section? Because basically that's how norming works. I mean, converted averages works. So what it's doing is it's looking at this number that was, see, first of all, what the system does is it takes this average and it converts it to a t-score or a standardized score. Then it takes this standardized score and it compares the course relative to the overall mean in the comparison group. So really what it's telling you is that in the comparison group for this specific choice that you've made, and in this case, the choice is the idea database. I mean, if I were to change it to the discipline, it would change. You see that, how it changed? Discipline, idea database. So in the discipline, what it's telling you, in your discipline, this score compared to the course relative in the comparison group of your discipline is similar. So you fall in a similar range in this specific discipline. Whereas here, compared in the group for that discipline and the norms that were collected on the left, the faculty here falls in the lower range and this one falls in a much lower range. Let me see, you have a follow-up question, but the 42 also fits within the range in the middle box. Oh, I see. Let me just double check that. Oops. I just did something with my, go back to the 42. No, the range is 38 to 44. So 42 would fall here. And then 45 to 55 is in the range here. Does that make sense? Okay. So your response is okay. I hope you understood the concept. Yeah, the range is when you mouse over it, you'll see the range here, 38 to 44. And the range here is 45 to 55. Any other questions? Okay, well, thanks for attending this training. And I'll send the recording to Brian. Bye-bye, everyone.
Oh, goodness.